Everyone, thank you for joining us this evening. Oh, my mic just turned on. I just felt that. All right, we are here tonight, and this is the moment at which, if this is not what you've come for, you can quietly sneak out of the room. But it will be interesting anyway, so do stay. We're going to be talking about power policy and innovation. In this case, power by which we mean electrical power. But we may touch on other types of power as well. Thank you to our generous sponsors, SSE, Scottish Power, Schneider Electric, for making this event possible, and to Imperial Business Partners for organizing it. And of course, welcome to Imperial. What we're going to do today is we've got, in a tight kind of just over an hour, we're going to have a couple of really great presentations from two of our academics, Rob and Bemi, sharing some of their information and insights into power. And then we're going to have a short panel discussion between representatives of SSE, Scottish Power, Schneider Electric, and one of our old startups here. And we're going to talk about all different aspects of power and electricity. During our panel discussion, we're going to touch upon the dual challenge of affordability and sustainability. But we are going to first hear from both Rob and Bemi. So just to let you know, I have to be reminded, there's not meant to be a fire drill, et cetera, et cetera. I think there is a way out this way, or out the way that you came, and then just exit the building and hang out by that kind of statue, just so we can make sure that everyone's all right if you hear the fire alarm. Hoping that this will be interesting for you. If there will be a chance for questions, some questions, short question sessions after each of the speakers, and a chance for questions during the panel discussion. But afterwards, we're all going to be hanging around here for a little bit for drinks and discussion afterwards. So please be able, and you'll be able and willing, hopefully, to engage with us there. So first of all, we are going to have Professor Rob Gross, who's the director of the UK Energy Research Centre. And he's going to talk to us about the journey to clean power. As his bio, he's worked at UKERC for a while, and has been the director for a while, and is a professor of energy policy here at Imperial. He's worked on renewable energy, electricity market design, energy systems transitions for well over 20 years. So either ask your question now or afterwards. And he's going to talk to us a little bit about the policy landscape shaping the net zero transition, and particularly the Clean Power to 2030 challenge. So the floor is yours, Rob.
Right, so thank you, first of all, Alyssa. It's brilliant to be here, and I just need to see whether that's your agenda. So this is now me. So as Alyssa has just said, I'm a professor here, actually Professor of Energy Policy and Technology. I'm director of something called UKERC, the UK Energy Research Centre, and I'll explain a little bit about what that is momentarily. There won't be too much of an advert for that. But what I also am is one of the advisory commissioners for the Clean Power 2030 mission. And I'll explain a little bit about what that is as well. I'll run through some slides that are the external presentation pack for the Clean Power 2030 team. And then I'll just give you a few reflections of my own on the process that they've set up, and the kind of the challenge that such an immediate target that is so ambitious represents. If I start sneezing halfway through, I can only apologise. It's that plane tree seed season that we have, particularly in this part of London, and particularly when the weather's hasn't rained for goodness knows how long. So I'm prone to that, and I remember it because I've been away from Imperial College for a few years, based over at UCL, where they have fewer of these seed things that make you sneeze. So I'm just have a quick look at this. I'm not going to go into great. This is you can skip the advert in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 seconds. This is the consortium that I lead. You can see some of the universities that are in that consortium. It's based here. It's been going for 20 years. It was originally based here. It went off, it made a mistake and took a turn left, headed off to Euston for 5 or 6 years and was based at UCL. But we are back here now. But we are a consortium with a number of different universities at least across GB. I think we need to get a Northern Ireland partner in. And we're focused on the kind of challenges that are associated with the transition. And we do interdisciplinary problem-facing research. So there are engineers and scientists amongst us, but also social scientists, economists, and so on. And that's how we try to approach this very multifaceted challenge. And I'm the director, and very happy to talk about what we do in a bit more detail. But these slides have been provided to me by Chris Stark, and he rejoices in the title of Head of Mission Control for the Clean Power Mission. And this was one of the first things that the incoming new Labour administration did last year, was to pluck Chris from a job that he'd only recently taken up at the Carbon Trust and put him in post to lead this mission. They then assembled a bunch of others, including me, all of whom are more august than I am, to act as commissioners, kind of a bit like the Climate Change Committee that I think Chris took as his inspiration, having been the CEO of the Climate Change Committee, and to provide challenge and oversight and guidance to this new unit, which has been set up within the Department of Energy Security and Net Zero, DESNZ, in order to try and help deliver the Clean Power 2030 mission, or to make Britain a clean energy superpower, also to cut bills by £300, which is two things combined, quite a challenge, that was in the Labour manifesto. So it was in the Labour election manifesto. So it's an absolutely cast iron commitment made pre-election, won the election, that the Clean Power 2030 mission is based upon. And the creation of the Clean Power unit and this kind of mission-based government. So just as a matter of interest, there is a clean power mission. The government has a clean power mission. Were you aware that we had a clean power mission? Can I have a show of hands? Great. Can anybody name for me one of the other missions that this government, I think there were 6 or 7 of them. I know we're all energy geeks, well, mainly energy geeks here, but can anybody name another of the missions of this mission-based government? Yep.
Economic growth.
Okay, you're right. They've got a strong focus on growth. I'm not going to try and I think the point being nobody's hand went up apart from yours, that this mission is the one that has come out of the blocks first, is delivering and has put in place a kind of within Whitehall institutional framework to try and get things done. And I think that reflects to a very large extent the fact that the Secretary of State in charge, Ed Miliband, has been in government before and understands how to get things moving through the Whitehall machinery. This Clean Power unit can't directly build wind turbines or build new network capacity, but it has this kind of role of coordinating, problem solving, and convening that I'll explain a bit more. Well, so before I do that, I'm going to bang through a bunch of slides. Most of these either come from Dukes, which is the UK energy statistics, or they come from the NESO system operators report on how we might achieve Clean Power 2030 that was delivered at the end of last year. So I'm not going to try and kind of spend time on them. I've only got 10 minutes anyway, but you're quite familiar, I'm sure, with the kind of the global carbon intensity story, which shows the UK doing better than most. The rationale for that, or the reason, the main driver of that, which is the growth of renewables and the decline, and then finally the end, the closure of coal in our power generation mix. You may be aware, many of you will be aware, that gas still accounts for about a third of our electricity generation, but many people are surprised at just how large a share renewables already occupy in the GB, not UK, island of Ireland is separate, power systems, separate issues, separate policies, but just how big the share of renewables, and in particular offshore wind already is. But now I'm just going to bang through a few slides, and I'm going to have to turn slightly away from my audience, otherwise I'll forget what's on each slide. Modest growth in consumer demand to 2030, not really very much, and a bit of an offsetting between some demand reduction through energy efficiency and some demand growth through electrification. This is not final energy, this is electricity demand. Bigger, stronger growth in electricity demand out to 2050, envisaged because of the electrification of transport and heating. In providing their advice to the government, the system operator, NESO, basically developed two scenarios. And what you can see here is the capacity mix across those two scenarios compared to the capacity that we have today. So this is in order to achieve an almost total removal of fossil generation from the system. The reason they have those two different capacity mixes and two equally somewhat different electricity output generation mixes is because one of them has a larger role for what they call dispatchable clean power, dispatchable firm power, so that means CCS and hydrogen. And the other has a larger role for variable renewables, storage and other sources of flex. That second one, therefore, needs more installed capacity overall and is a rather different proposition to build and to manage. All of that requires a very significant expansion of capacity. And just in order to try and explain the process and the kind of journey that the Clean Power team have been on, last year the focus was on whether or not this Clean Power target was deliverable. And that question was answered that it's deliverable in principle if you pull out all of the stops positively by NESO, by the system operator. As soon as was possible, the Clean Power unit then moved to produce an action plan. And the action plan had to be signed off across Whitehall by all players, including Number 10 and the Treasury, which is extremely important because that then provides a certain legitimacy to onward progress. We have now moved into a phase where the principal objective is to establish the tools that we need in order to benchmark progress and to establish the things that can be done to increase progress against the various metrics of success that we've got. And so, I mean, these are very stylized, but a less stylized version of a kind of dashboard has been developed or is being developed so that we can monitor so where we are at the moment, where we would need to get to, and kind of comparing what the kind of level of challenges is. So this one is for offshore wind, and you can see that the kind of, if it's in a solid colour and it's towards the left of the screen, that's either built or committed or planned. And if it's hatched, that's the kind of gap to get to the Clean Power target. And these are all in gigawatts. And the bit on the far right, the kind of, if you like, it's the bit where the rev counter on the car goes into the red, is the range between the two scenarios that NESO provided. So I'm just going to flip through these, and you can just eyeball them, and I'll make no further comment. But that was offshore wind. This is onshore wind. This is solar. This is battery storage. This is long-duration energy storage, which largely means a couple of pumped hydro prospective sites. This is low-carbon dispatchable power, which, as I've already mentioned, means hydrogen to power or CCS, a role for bioenergy, but perhaps we won't get into that this evening. Interconnectors, not much of a growth, and then this is demand-side flex. Quite a lot of discussion around demand-side flex, which I'm happy to pick up on. Up to 12 gigawatts of new demand-side flex envisaged in the NESO scenarios. And so the task at hand at the moment, and I think this illustrates it very well, is to understand what's in flight, understand what the obstacles to delivering ensuring that flight continues and makes progress, and understanding what the kind of actions are that are needed on the part of the CP30 team in order to help to deliver this. And so this is the example of the network build that's needed because quite a large number of that offshore wind capacity that I showed on one of the slides is already on train or has planning or has a site agreed with the Crown Estate or for other reasons is likely to be, and reasons to do with resource, is likely to be located in Scotland. And we built an electricity grid that was primarily designed to take electricity from the coal belts across northeast and central England to demand. And we now need to build an electricity grid that takes electricity from the wind belt off the east coast and in Scotland to demand. And there's obviously many challenges associated with doing that. One of the first things that's been agreed, together with Ofgem and NESO, is a programme of connection reform to manage the queue of projects that's waiting to connect to the grid more strategically. A lot of investment would be required. There are challenges of workforce and skills that I wouldn't pretend to have a particular expertise on, but happy to come back to. And just to kind of show you a little bit more where we are at the moment is thinking about how some of these things come together and work through. Now that's more or less it. That's more or less it from me, and these are largely illustrative. So I will just see whether I can come to the end of my slides and pause. There's just one or two other things that I just wanted to try and think about and to discuss. So first of all, there's obviously, and Lisa and I were just talking about this, there's an emerging kind of politicisation of issues around net zero. It's now opposed by some political parties that were previously in favour of it. I think it's important to be clear, this is a clean power target for 2030. This isn't net zero in 2050, but it's all part of the same narrative. And so I think there are political headwinds that weren't there previously. We need to be aware of those. The second is to think about the role of innovation. So mission-oriented innovation funding was announced in last year's budget. The Science Minister, Patrick Vallance, has also announced that there will be money aligned with the Clean Power Mission. How much that turns out to be depends a bit on the spending review outcome, and obviously fiscally things are quite challenging at the moment. But there may well be opportunities for additional funding to try and come alongside some of the things the Clean Power Mission is trying to do. The challenge is how to spend that in a productive way for a target that's only 4 years out. And I think that is one of the things that I've been personally tasked with as a Commissioner. The other is to try and provide input into the decision over zonal pricing under REMA, which I'm not going to be drawn on too much this evening, I'm afraid. But I think for us, thinking as innovators, there's huge opportunities on the smart demand side, flex side of things, thinking about smart controls, AI, and a whole bunch of other things. But the really interesting thing, and I'd be really keen to hear what the panel have to say about the innovation side of things, is whether we can unlock some of the opportunities that are coming towards us, for example, in storage, more quickly. What can be done to expedite those? So I will stop. Thank you.
I'm sure people are burning with questions for Rob. Actually, what I'm going to propose, because just to make sure we're on time, I'm going to get Bemi to present, and then have a couple of questions for each of you before we move to the panel. Is that all right?
Of course.
So save your questions for a moment. Okay, so it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Bemi Olule. I'm going to check what your title is. What's your title? What is your title? Well, I know that you're a lecturer, but especially what kind of lecturer? Should have done this before. Anyway, I work a lot with Bemi. She's an expert in technology, innovation, how that works. she's looked at the economics of it, the technology of it, and the financial modeling of it. So all kinds of aspects about how we use innovation to create and bring on board the technologies that we need for the power transition. And she's going to speak specifically about some of the work that she's been doing in collaboration from academia here with some of the partners that we have in the room.
Thanks, Alisa. So I'm very much focused on how to improve the economic viability of deep decarbonization solutions for heavy sectors by using market-based mechanisms of pool financing. But today, I'll be talking about how we can leverage industry-academia partnership for an increased competitive advantage and showing some case studies of what we've been doing at Imperial College. This is probably just 1% of what's happening around the college when it comes to partnerships. Now, there are different forms of partnerships between industry and academia. There's PhD funding, collaborative projects, endowed chairs, technology licensing, expert panels, industrial studentships, and there's so many more typologies of what these partnerships look like. So I can say from experience and from speaking to other academics in this space, partnerships are really the engines for creating real-world impact from what we do in research and with scholarship. Now, the future of partnerships is changing. Now we're seeing partnership to improve competitive advantages for industry, especially in the space of clean tech or in the space of sustainability or in the space of the transition to net zero. So whether new players in that space looking to understand where the competitive advantage is or existing players looking to transition. And there are some examples around the world of what this has looked at, especially for higher TRL technologies, really on how these partnerships can support deployment of technologies as well. So deployment covers adoption, scaling, and commercialization. And the case studies I will show today are really around this sort of partnerships that helps to improve a competitive advantage or identify a competitive advantage or support technology deployment. So I gave a summary here just in case I run out of time. So I'll bring 4 particular projects that are interesting. 2 of them with SSC and Schneider Electric. So the SSC project was to assess the economic viability of green hydrogen. So can we reduce the levelized cost of green hydrogen by monetizing the byproducts like waste heat, like oxygen, like improving water circularity? So what's the impact on the economic viability of green hydrogen, and can we create a business case for green hydrogen production? The second project is with Schneider Electric, so looking at interventions to support an on-the-look sector in the UK, the SME sector, in deploying low-carbon technologies by 2030, and how we can develop like new service offerings or new policies or solidify what we currently have for this sector. And I'll bring in a case study for Sky Diamond, really looking at creating that sustainability-driven market differentiator for a product that is made from renewables, made from CO2 captured from the air, and hydrogen from water using electrolysis. And final case study is for Ecotricity, looking at green gas from grass. So in addition to electrons, we still need molecules. So to see the potential of biomethane made from grass in the UK. So that's just a sample, a handful of case studies that demonstrate the kind of industry academia partnerships we do at Imperial College, and that's been made possible by the IBP, Imperial Business Partners. So just for the first case study, which is trying to improve the economic viability of green hydrogen production by leveraging the byproducts, so the economic value of the waste oxygen and waste heat. So we can show, for instance, the impact of the levelized cost of hydrogen under different scenarios with our very bottom-up modeling approach in the UK from now to 2050, again to support creating a business case for hydrogen and a competitive advantage for the partners as well who are looking to, that's publicly available data, who are looking to create a competitive advantage within that market segment. And the second case study it's on interventions to support UK SMEs. Majority of the businesses in the UK are defined as SMEs by size, and they are responsible for over 48% of carbon emissions within the UK business sector. And it's cross-sectoral, so you could have SMEs in cement, SMEs in retail, there are SMEs everywhere. And we looked at this sector because they are underserved in UK policy, especially when it comes to supporting decarbonization. And this case study was to come up with some form of policy interventions and private sector interventions to support the SMEs, but also to understand the barriers they face or the lack of knowledge within the sector. So this is a case study to maybe get Schneider thinking of how to better serve the SME sector. So the third case study to illustrate these industry academia partnerships to drive a competitive advantage is one we did for Sky Diamond. Now, this was simply trying to find that sustainability-driven market differentiator. So Sky Diamond is made from air using renewable energy. It's a UK-based company in Gloucester. I got that pronunciation right, I'm learning. So it's made from the sun, wind, rain, that's the source of renewables, and CO2 is captured from the air to get carbon. So the production process looks something like that, and the end product is diamond, and of course it's the same quality as mined diamond, has a lower environmental footprint. So this project was set up to understand the life cycle of Sky Diamond and compare it with mined diamond. It's good for the environment, and it could be priced at the price of mined diamonds as well. So that's an example of the sort of partnerships that can establish a competitive advantage for the partners. The last one is green gas from grass. So we still need molecules in the UK. So this was a study to validate the feasibility of biomethane from grass in the UK and understanding the constraints on land. So we look at a process for electricity that makes biomethane from grass, and that can be fed into the grass grid. To understand also the feasibility in the UK, how much land is available to meet that demand of heating, what is feasible, staying away, of course, from grazing land, what is possible. And the QR code is for the report that was published, just to understand the grass mills that will be required to meet 20% of the UK's gas demand from biomethane, what the cost is going to be, and what the impact on jobs creation, as well as comparing it with a heat pump rollout for the domestic sector. Again, so that's a sort of partnership that we do with industry at Imperial. And just to summarize, so we can work together with industry to deliver more competitive, sustainable solutions by thinking of how to monetize byproducts. Another advantage of a partnership for a competitive advantage is thinking about developing new product offerings that enable you to tap into underserved sectors within a particular energy vector, for instance. And finally, we have and we can continue to work together with industry to demonstrate more radical innovation, especially the commercialization of high TRL innovations within that sustainability driven market. And finally, to validate scalable and high potential solutions, so doing the techno-economics, doing the impact on policies to establish a business case for those technologies. And that is the end. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to allow for a couple of questions for both of the speakers before we get on the panel. Well, Bemi's up here. Any questions for Bemi? Yeah, go for it.
Thank you. So, kind of, obviously, the UK is competing with all different countries that are trying to decarbonise, especially the power sector and different sectors. How would you describe the UK policy environment as it comes to kind of helping these initiatives, these partnerships with academia and industry? Do you think it's supportive? Is it more the government could do? Yeah, how would you describe it?
It's supportive in terms of academia industry partnerships. I mean, we've seen a lot of established partnerships in different ways in the UK. So I'll say it's supportive, yeah.
Great. Any other questions? Yeah, go for it.
Hi, thank you. Do you think that the 2030 target maybe limits innovation or limits what we can do in that time? I mean, we heard it's only 4 years. What can we really do that's groundbreaking?
Oh, that's probably a question for Rob. The benefits of targets is they're supposed to accelerate innovation and finance flows into innovations that are part of a strategy, right? So what we'll begin to see is probably a shift of finance into clean power innovations or anything to expand the grid. So that's what's been happening historically if you look at when a target is set. But the pace of innovation, I'll leave that for Rob to answer, but it has potential.
Okay, that's really helpful. Let's segue into Rob answering that question, and we'll look for other questions for Rob. I can see there's a question in the back. If you can grab Bemi at the break, if that's all right. Rob.
So, I mean, yes, it has the potential to, anything that you choose to do now. So, I mean, just to give you an example, would you choose not to purchase a car? Because if you wait 10 years, you're going to have a more technologically advanced car. Would you choose not to purchase an iPhone or a mobile phone device of whatever manufacturer, because another one, a better one, will be on the market in the future? So I think, generally speaking, the answer to that is going to be no. I think the 2030 target is extremely challenging. If I thought it was completely impossible and crazy and nuts, then I wouldn't have been persuaded to join the advisory commission. It's extremely difficult and challenging. There's no question about that. And it gives rise to new requirements for innovation. But once that, if we achieve it or get close to it, then we will have made a radical acceleration of progress that was already underway towards decarbonising the power system. A lot of that asset and infrastructure will then be in place. We will be continuing to expand the use of electricity as part of the longer, we hope, unless we would decide we don't want to do it anymore, journey towards net zero or to deep decarbonisation. And that will give rise to a continued need for innovation. And operating and managing the assets that we've put in place by 2030 will also give rise to a need for innovations. So I think what we need to do is look through the window of 2030 to the years that go beyond it, see it as a kind of an attempt at acceleration, be realistic about how much off-the-shelf technology we're going to need to build to put assets in place to deliver it, but I think that ultimately, over the longer term, it will be seen as a driver of innovation rather than an impediment thereof.
Thanks. Very thorough answer. Was your question for Rob or for Bemi?
Maybe both.
Oh, yeah, sure, go for it.
So I noticed that carbon capture and storage plays a really significant role in the decarbonization strategy. And I know that right now it's not economically viable. So I was wondering how innovation is playing a role in carbon capture and storage when it comes to the decarbonization strategy or the strategy that you have. And as well as that, I know that Imperial has a carbon capture and storage plant. So I was wondering if there was any innovation, any partnerships with regard to innovation there.
I'm sure that there'll be colleagues at Imperial that might be in the audience who could answer your last question better than I can. There's a long tradition of research into various aspects of carbon capture and storage, including the pilot demonstrator that you've seen, and many collaborations and research projects on that topic. So I think it's really important to be clear, for the Clean Power Target 2030, in one of the scenarios that the NESO, the system operator, develops, there's a small but important role for dispatchable firm carbon power. One of the options for delivering that is CCS on gas-fired power stations. The other would be hydrogen to power. Projects to deliver both of those are already envisaged through various existing projects around the industrial clusters and around the hydrogen strategy and the CCS strategy. Where CCS begins to play a significant role in decarbonisation is beyond 2030. So just to be clear, we're not envisaging a major role for CCS in the period for 2030. We're envisaging that it could play a small but very important role if plans to develop CCS were implemented such that it were focused on electricity generation and accelerated somewhat. It becomes much more significant and important it's very important globally. It's very important globally partly because we're going to overshoot and therefore we're going to need negative emissions technologies. There are plans to have bioenergy capture and storage in this country, so that would also be negative emissions technology. It will be important for industrial decarbonisation. I think the role that it plays in electricity decarbonisation and how competitive it is to a system that's largely renewables dominated and perhaps has other sources of flex remains to be seen. So, I mean, Bemi's also got expertise you may want to add to that.
Okay, well, she agrees. Perfect. You can speak to Bemi about it a bit afterwards as well. Okay. I'm going to say thank you there, otherwise we're going to run out of time.
Sorry.
No. That was great, clear answers. Rob will be around later as well, I think, if people have further questions. Okay, perfect. So what we're going to do now is move on to a short but hopefully interesting panel discussion. We're going to move on to talking a little bit more about the innovation piece, which I think was really kind of nicely teed up by some of the answers to those questions. That, you know, everything that we've just described is setting up a context where innovation is really, really important. What we've seen in the past sort of up until recent times, one of the main drivers for innovation in the electricity sector was the green part, the sustainability part. Over the past few years, we've seen much greater emphasis on the need for energy security as also a driver for innovation. And more recently, it's been brought back to our attention how important, obviously, affordability is of electricity. And all of these three things continue to drive the need for and actual real innovation. So we're going to hear from a range of people at Schneider, SSE, Scottish Power, and Brill Power now about that innovation. So if you can all come up, please. Oh. I'm just holding it. Okay, perfect. Oh, am I sitting in the middle? I guess I can sit in the middle. Yeah, I'm going to get there. Oh, wait. All right. I'm going to start by asking you each to introduce yourself and your role, and then we'll get on to some questions. Let's start with you, Leighton.
So I'm Leighton Hill. I'm the Vice President of Strategy for Schneider Electric in the UK and Ireland.
Right. Carolyn?
I'm Carolina Hicks. I'm a co-founder and head of finance and operations at Brill Power. And unlike these big names beside me, we make battery management systems. They look like this. And are, I guess, a small innovator in this larger system.
Yeah, very delighted to be here. So I'm Jenna Hunter. I sit in SSE's Corporate Strategy Directorate, and I'm heading up our innovation strategy.
And I'm Tom Williamson, Head of Innovation at Scottish Power. So Gianna's counterpart, we've sat on panels like this many times together before.
Okay, perfect. Hopefully make it interesting. I'll try to answer a different question.
There's got to be a first time, right?
Okay, perfect. So we're going to start with the role that technology innovation can play in achieving, let's start by looking at clean power by 2030, so what Rob was talking about. I'm going to ask you each to say what you think the role technology innovation can play. It can be new technology, existing technology, emerging technology, demand side, supply side, whatever. Let's start here.
Cool. So probably the short answer is all of the above, right? So technology innovation in driving towards clean power 2030 it's going to play a role. Obviously, we've got already a suite of technologies that we know we can use to decarbonise the power sector, right? We can get really quite a long way along the line, and we've got a long way along the line. You saw in Rob's slides earlier that they were there, and we saw, offshore wind, for example, is going to form the backbone of the energy system, right? That's a technology that we know is there and it works. But in order to make that fit into this new energy system that we're going to be building, there's requirements for those sort of system innovations, as well as new types of offshore wind, for example, so floating offshore wind. Yeah, that's going to be, the offshore wind farms that Scottish Power have built in the UK have been fairly close to shore, in fairly shallow seas, quite easy seabed conditions. And they were hard to build, but in the grand scheme of things, for building big bits of metal in the sea, they were actually pretty easy. When you start looking at the ones we will be building in the next round, sort of off the coast of Scotland, the next generation of wind farms that will be built in the ScotWind round that will be commissioned are going to be built in really deep waters, rocky seabed conditions, much higher wave pitches than you see anywhere in East Anglia where we've built already. And so floating offshore wind is going to be a really key technology for that. So there's this whole big range of technologies that we'll need to use to iterate the solutions that we've already got if we're really going to drive hard towards Clean Power 2030 and beyond.
Okay, great. So sticking maybe with demand side, you may have more to add.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then I think, sort of like, as Tom said, we've been on a lot of panels sort of like together, and you will find us agreeing on quite a lot of things, because also quite literally we operate in the same waters. So we also up in Scotland sort of operate there. But I think also in the role of like technology innovation, I think one of the things probably to pull out is that innovation means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And you have your technology innovation, but equally you have your social innovation, your policy innovation. So, and all of these different types of innovations kind of do have to fit together. I think at the same time we're looking at different horizons. We know that, so if you look at the nuclear renaissance in the UK, a lot of big things coming down the line. We're having like floating, which is a new technology that has never been delivered before. Like we're literally, designing a new plane while flying it. So it's kind of like something absolutely astonishing. But I think that there's a lot of major changes that are coming down the line that will change the energy system fundamentally. But I think also to kind of reel it back a bit, what we kind of looking also like to Rob's point is there's also a lot to be said in incremental innovation. So it's actually how can innovation, technology, social, policy, consumer behaviors, how can this help us build better, faster, and cheaper, particularly if we're looking to hit the 2030 targets.
Okay, I'm interested in something you said there. You talked about social innovation, policy innovation. I think a lot of people kind of have a sense of comfort about businesses doing technology innovation. How, as a company, do you approach social innovation in a way that your customers, the people in the areas where you work, your employees feel like you've got a place there?
Yeah, and I think so there's kind of like something to be said about it being very integrated in the companies, because I always like to say, and probably Tom will have the same with Scottish Power, that if you're trying to work with SSE, it's a bit like herding cats, just because we're such a big organisation, we're crossing across so many topics, but also we have a fundamentally fantastic sustainability team. For example, if I'm looking at our renewables division, they've actually developed a completely new method to calculate social return on investment. So it's kind of a methodology that was even mentioned and cited by the World Bank as setting new examples. So it's actually kind of, and I think a huge chunk of that is that it's embedded throughout the company, so that your particular sustainability, you don't look at it as an add-on, a nice to have, but actually through building green infrastructure, net zero, embedding sustainability and also into your designs, you create an affordable energy system. So I think that is looped in, but actually very much embedded. And also you have to have the senior leadership to kind of have the buy-in. And we're quite lucky at SSE that most of our leadership says like, yes, actually sustainability, social returns on investment, just transition are all key priorities alongside building stuff.
Okay, thanks. That's really interesting to have that insight into how you make that work. I'm going to skip you for a moment, Carolyn. We'll come back. So we've done supply side and social dimensions, policy dimensions. How do you see the role of innovation?
Yeah, I think, at Schneider, we're really focused on two important vectors for decarbonization. So electrification and then digitization. So we want to electrify everything that we can in the economy. That's probably the most ready technology that exists for many applications. And then we want to digitize everything so that our customers and our customers' customers can measure the energy that they use and manage it and reduce it. And so I would say that the kind of innovation that I think a lot about is not necessarily the bleeding edge of what is yet to come, but it's what we already have here that we just need to deploy. And so in some cases, that's commercial innovation to make the pounds and pence make sense for our customers. It might be in finding partnership models so that we can reach markets like the small and medium enterprise market that is not profitable for us as ourselves to reach, but through a partnership ecosystem of distributors and panel builders and others, we can innovate and reach and help large swaths of the economy to decarbonize. The generation side is really important, but if we transform everything to carbon-free by 2030, on the generation side, we're still going to have loads of diesel and petrol being burned all around the country and lots of other problematic, things for our overall carbon footprint. So I think that both supply and demand are important, and we take a holistic view of innovation, product, yes, but also business models and how we approach different customers to get there.
Great, and that really resonates with what you were saying, Jan, about there's different aspects to innovation, right? People see different things, and this business model innovation bit is very, very important because the university, we generate lots of new technologies. We also need to think about how they reach their customers and how that works, and those business model aspects are really, really, really important. So thank you for that. All right, moving on then. Presumably you see a role for technology innovation.
Of course.
So tell us a little bit about your perspective.
I guess from where I've seen innovation playing a role, it's sort of along three avenues. There's the technological innovation. And to your point, innovation, when my team thinks about innovation, we're talking about what are the latest patents we can submit, what are the things that aren't yet built. But actually innovation on the whole is actually the things that already exist and are ready to deploy. So I think there's an immediate application for innovation that the public would consider innovation. And then there's the next steps towards staying ahead of the curve of what is the next wave of innovative in this space. So there's clearly an application for current and upcoming technologies. In the second space, Rob very briefly flipped through a slide that talked about skills. And I think the innovation in these technologies is developing companies, teams, and people who are now thinking about the skill, or now developing the skills that they need to have to operate in the next generation of clean tech and in power and renewables. I think the conversation that we're having here, like every person in this room is now better informed than most of the population around power and the challenges associated with it. So this is now upskilling all of us in terms of being ready for what's ahead. And then the third piece is economy. And I know we're going to touch on a lot of these points later, but it's nice to see what's happening in the UK, but we're already thinking about at Brill Power what's happening in the world and how are we going to position ourselves and our technology across different markets and what is the best place to be. And so making sure that we're innovating, making sure that our innovations are being implemented broadly is essential, and that's going to create economy in whatever country it is that these innovations are based.
Okay, perfect, great. Lots of really interesting considerations there. Before we go on to the next question, can you just tell us a little bit about the piece of equipment in front of you? I can't be the only person wanting to know.
So this is a battery management system. Inside every battery pack is a battery management system, including the ones on your phone. It controls all the safety characteristics, charge and discharge, estimates their state of health and state of charge. And in a small system, packs work perfectly well together, but in large systems, they'll be limited by their weakest series connection. And so what we've done at Brill Power is created a new battery management system that includes power electronics to best leverage the cells within the pack. So even within a battery pack itself, there's lots of very few moving parts, lots of moving elements. But this is just one segment of where we can innovate because the cells are the same, but the electronics we're missing. It means we can reduce the levelized cost of storage by 20% and avoid cells sent to waste.
Okay, great. I hope we're all going out way more skilled than we came in. now. And I think that just puts when you introduced yourself, you said, oh, I'm just doing a small innovation, not like these people, but this is really vitally important. So thanks for sharing that with us. So thinking about innovation and thinking about what Bemi was saying, which is how, she presented partnership, including with some of the people here at the table, between academia and industry. Interested to hear your experiences or how you think collaboration can work well between those two companies.
Yeah. So it can work brilliantly and does work brilliantly and has to work brilliantly, I think. So I've been at Scottish Power for quite a long time, like 15 years or so, but I've only had this job for 3 or so. And when I first got offered it, so lots of my friends and family, and actually especially my family, sort of said, why have they offered this job to you? You're not an electrical engineer, you're not an innovator, you don't know anything about this stuff. I've been in our corporate affairs department for a long time. And I wondered that myself a little bit at times. But then once I'd done the job for a while, I realized it was a people job, a collaborating job, bringing people together sort of job. And that's exactly what this sort of model of innovation, which is called open innovation. You hear it a lot in sort of innovation conferences and around the circuit, but the concept being that no one organization has got a monopoly on all the smartest people, the best ideas, the great concepts, the proper processes. So the good, intelligent thing to do is to recognize that, open your doors and bring those smart people in and collaborate with them and work with them. So that's the model that we, Scottish Power, and we, Iberdrola, which is our Spanish parent company, that's the model that we operate for innovation. And probably one of the biggest parts of that is our universities collaboration program, which Imperial is a really big part. Iberdrola sort of across the world operates with really big, well-known universities, MIT, and all these sort of really big names. Here in the UK, the thing that we do differently is we also collaborate with SSE, who are our competitors. We've always been brought up to hate each other. So, we're not supposed to be friends, but the reality is,
I'm sitting here.
Yeah, right, exactly. But the reality is, John referred to it earlier, right? We're essentially really similar companies. We're both big Scottish industrial engineering companies that are building networks and building renewables and driven by that clean power mission as well. So working together makes total sense. So we work together really closely, not just with Imperial, but with Strathclyde up in Glasgow as well, sort of sharing that, that expertise, sharing that mission, sharing the challenges. And frankly, sometimes we have to deal with sort of tricky IP things, but we kind of get through it. And, Joanna's a bit like me, and she sort of asks for forgiveness rather than permission. And as a model, that kind of gets us through most of the time, I think.
Yeah, perfect. Great. Well, I'm going to jump from your perspective at the larger company side to your perspective, Caroline, at a startup. Or not so much a startup, scale up, I guess.
In terms of innovation with academia.
And collaboration. I mean, could also be, Tom started to bring in collaborating with competitors or other organizations.
This is essential for us. I guess we started as a spin-out from the university. And so that in itself is kind of this nice little isolated bubble where the technology works really well in concept and simulations. And then once we started to develop the technology, it became clear over time that we needed to be able to talking more closely to the industry, the market, not just what our customers needed from a form factor perspective, but where was the sector headed in terms of voltage requirements for our specific product. And you can get some of that information publicly available, you can get some of that information from conferences, but actually where we get the most insights is when we're building alongside other partners. And we've done research projects with Imperial College and Aston Martin and Delta Motorsport, where we're building a battery pack with the latest innovations. And so we're learning from the analysis that the Imperial team was doing, which was very helpful, but actually physically building the product with Delta Motorsport to see how they were using the hardware and implementing it and what questions they were asking us. These were just essential learnings and key to move the innovation from sort of very early stage in towards productization.
Okay, great. That really nice and interesting, detailed examples at a different end of the spectrum. Great, Leighton.
Can I just
yes,
ask Caroline, how do you, sorry, I'm going to throw you off
That
course.
was nice. It's fair.
Yeah. How do you find working with people like us, like big corporates? Do you find it easy? Because, I'm hoping, you haven't got terrible experiences with any of our specific businesses that you go throw us under the bus. But, we are big and we've got processes and legal teams and compliance teams, and we move slowly a lot of the time. How do you find, as someone who is right at that bleeding edge, how do you find it working with organisations like us?
I mean, it's not easy.
I'm more
that's a very short answer. But it's twofold. I think there's an element of trust. This is kind of the first question, which is how do I present my technology without feeling like it's going to be stolen from me, right? Like, so at the beginning, we were a team of over 4 founders, like 6 engineers, and we're pitching to companies that have thousands of engineers. And there were events that we felt that we were presenting at just so that their technical team could pick the brains of our technical team. And so you end up being a little bit careful with how you engage with big corporates. But then there's always value in it, because having a partnership with a big corporate, especially at early stage, but at all stages, is extraordinarily valuable to startup company, even if it's just that this large institute organization is considering our technology. They see value in the value proposition, and that speaks a lot to other customers. It says a lot to investors. So there's huge value in it. And then navigating within, honestly, I don't even know how you guys do it yourselves. I mean, we usually have a single point of contact who then introduces us to other points of contacts. And I'd say the biggest movement of action has been usually through government grants. And that's because they not just have the funding, but they have deadlines. And so, and that's both in terms of getting the project together, but also, the collaboration agreement has to be finished by this date, or we're just not going to get to move forward. So often there's like a really forceful external hand that's been very helpful.
That's interesting, because you actually answered, again, that question that you asked earlier, which is something about what the role of the government is in encouraging some of these partnerships. So that's really interesting to hear. Yeah. Great, good intervention.
Sorry.
Leighton, you're smiling along, so tell us a little bit about innovation partnerships from your side.
Yeah, of course. I think part of our DNA is really around sustainability, a major part of it. That's how we define our mission. And to that end, we acknowledge that we do not always have the perfect solution for every application. So when we design solutions, like a building management system that might manage this building, we design with open architecture, because we'd love it if everything were Schneider, but we acknowledge that might not always be the case. And so we want to ensure that we're opening our customers and enabling them to achieve their decarbonization goals, their energy management goals, their industrial automation goals, with whatever collection of solutions work for them. And so I think there are other companies that believe in more of the walled garden approach to a closed ecosystem, and I think we try to be very open and collaborative in that way.
And do you ever, if you're getting people to kind of play on the open system, do you ever spot things that they've done to innovate and bring that back in?
I'm sure we do, in a compliant way, of course. The
IP lawyers are always watching. They're on the screen.
No, I think in an open economy, we always want to learn from each other. I think it is a bit alarming, the story you've told about having to be guarded. No, having to be guarded about that. But yeah, I think we always want to learn from each other, and execution is everything. So there have been lots of good ideas, maybe that have been attempted many times and in many different ways, but before they actually achieve that sort of escape velocity. And so, yeah, we try to learn from our customers, competitors, university partners as well.
Great, perfect. And what I'm going to do to prevent that kind of vehement agreement between the two of you, I'm going to move on to the next question and ask you that first. So, when I introduced the panel, we were speaking a little bit about this balance between getting, this new priority of affordability, and how do we do that alongside sustainability, and perhaps innovation is one route to that. But talk to us a little bit about the innovation that you're doing, or how you're providing affordability to your customers.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, and I think probably one of the things I'd like to mention for like, people that might not be too familiar with SSE as a company, so we operate across the entire value chain. So we do have generation assets, so your wind farms, your renewable assets, your thermal assets, but then we also have both the transmission distribution network, and then we have industrial customers as well. So, and I think the piece of affordability is kind of like woven into every single step of it. So on sort of like generating electricity, so how can we do it in a essentially like in a cheaper way? How can we export that sort of like better? But then also, if you're looking at our networks companies, actually everything they have to do as part of their license has to be for their customers. So they have to make sure that they build a resilient network that is good for the customers, that you can essentially just produce it again, like get electricity cheaper into people's homes. And as part of that, the regulator, so Ofgem, for example, has a big strategic innovation fund. So as part of that, if you do want to do anything, affordability kind of has to be at the forefront. And I think what we're particularly seeing at the moment, like, if you're looking at any of the external narratives, there's a bit of a trend away from sustainability, or people kind of looking at it from a slightly more like suspicious way. But I think again, what kind of needs to be sort of like avoided is that affordability and sustainability become almost like oxymorons, because actually one kind of leads to the other. So kind of not looking at sustainability as like you have to pay a premium for like anything that's green. It's going to be more expensive, and actually if we rely more on oil and gas, for example, you will have automatically a more cheaper energy system. I think it's a bit of a red herring in a false economy. If we're kind of sticking with decarbonising the system, achieving a net zero energy system, we will also actually achieve the most affordable system that is possible. So I think that kind of making sure that the narrative, even though it moves on, kind of actually still sort of like that sustainability leads to affordability.
Okay, perfect. And not of agreement there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think sustainability leads to long-term affordability. And part of the challenge that we have in our market is that we have to invest in green generation and other technologies in order to unlock future savings from not having that fuel cost. And I think one of the things that we need to deploy as a grid and a system more is tools to unlock and tie together all of those distributed assets that exist, and even the cars in car parks and things with vehicle to grid. I mean, there's a load of assets that are out there that we can bring to bear to drive affordability, but so many of them are invisible to our network operator partners, and we're not fully leveraging those. So we really need to tap into all of the batteries that are out there and that will be built, the generating assets, solar, wind, and otherwise, to ensure that we're fully leveraging all of those assets. So it's a much more complex ecosystem, I think, than the old model of just central coal-fired power in the middle of the country. It's a lot more diffuse and complex to manage, but we have the tools at our disposal to manage those distributed assets, I think.
Maybe on that point, it's not just more complex, but the people involved are maybe new in that space. So chat to a bus operator. I mean, they used to need to focus on scheduling and drivers and where are the buses, and now they're thinking, well, is my fleet of EVs going to be charged? What am I doing with my assets? Are my bus depots going to have enough storage? All of a sudden, bus operators are now storage operators, and it's just a totally different space.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's interesting. It speaks nicely to that reskilling piece.
That kind of reads across to your domestic customers as well, doesn't it? Yeah, so those bus operators have had that new paradigm forced upon them, but yeah, that's kind of their job, their business, and it wasn't, but now it is. Whereas domestic customers are also sort of being encouraged to become this prosumer model of being much more involved, and some people will be right into that, right? I imagine there's probably a few here in the room who have got their solar panels and their EV, and they monitor it and they flip things back and forwards during the day. Well, that's lots at the other end of the spectrum. Loads and loads of people just can't bother with that. What they want to happen is they flip the switch and the light comes on, the kettle boils, the TV comes on, and that is absolutely, I'm probably much more at that end of the spectrum than where I probably should be at the prosumer end, right? But I think we've got to be able to deliver good outcomes for both sets of those people and everyone in between, and sort of innovating within some of the system stuff, is really key for that, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe just sort of like adding one thing to it, because I think this kind of lends itself quite nicely to just looking at like how complex also some of the challenges are that we're looking at. If you kind of start pulling on one thread, you're probably causing like a complete like domino effect. And I think that's also one of the reasons, because the challenges are so complex, but they're so integrated. That's, I think, also why we quite like to all like work together, essentially, because everyone brings sort of like a different piece of the puzzle sort of like to the table. And based on that, we can hopefully sort of build like a solution together. And I think academia and sort of the role that it plays as a convener is quite important in that ecosystem, because you kind of drive us all into the same direction.
Perfect. Well, with that, in our role as convener, let's move to some questions. We've got a few minutes to have some questions from the audience. One up there on the far right.
Hello. I've just got a question. I think it is applicable to all four of the panel members. It's in relation to supply chain across generation and transmission and the cost associated with that. I mean, we've had the success story with solar prices collapsing, but transmission supply chains and wind turbine supply chains are a lot stickier. How much of a barrier do you think that's having to your operational costs in terms of the short term and the medium term to deliver your transmission upgrades, your generation upgrades?
Good. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take 3 questions, and then we're going to spread them out. So let's remember that one.
Hi. Thank you for the interesting talk. Just a question, because I think almost everyone touched on it, was about having the price of electricity to be reduced with all these incentives. I just can't see how we can get to that point when the government don't have enough funding for the moment. And I see that in the next 5 years we have lots of projects lined up, which I think worth up to 500, 700 billion pounds. And we're looking for partnership, private and public-private partnership. So I guess all these investors are looking to get profits and return on investment afterwards. So I can't figure out how we can get to a lower electricity prices.
Perfect. Thanks. And another question? Go ahead.
Thank you. In thinking of how innovation happens in the private sector and in academia, I was wondering where you see the best areas for partnerships between industry and academia, and where are the gaps in the type of innovation you do that academia can help? Okay,
perfect. Good. I'm going to take these 3 questions. So the first one was about sticky costs, particularly in transmission and so on, and how that affects what you're trying to do. One of you two want to take that?
Happy to take that one. I think putting your finger, to be honest, at a very important point, because I think supply chain and also supply chain innovation is one of sort of the key things, and I think it lends itself quite nicely also to what Rob was saying earlier, like in terms of deploying funding and making sure that whatever we do is actually impactful enough so that we can deliver on CP 2030. But I think, supply chains, in particular homegrown supply chains, will be one of the key sticking points. And I think we have like a lot of teams that work a lot on, can we actually secure an HVDC supply chain? Where the materials are coming from? What is the country's industrial strategy? How can we deliver on those? So I think it's a lot of questions that are really, really important. And I think we all acknowledge that supply chains will be a key bottleneck. But I think we're all trying to sort of work together, that we're not sort of, robbing Peter to pay Paul, but actually kind of have like a systems level approach to how can we deliver on some of these supply chains and make sure we actually also build a domestic supply chain system as well.
Did you have anything to add to that?
Just to say that's, sort of in that supply chain space is probably, Jan's absolutely right. It definitely is a sticking point. It's going to be a bottleneck. That's probably the place where Gianna and I stop being collaborators and start becoming competitors, because both our companies have got enormous investment plans on transmission grids, on wind farms, on distribution grids, and there's only so much steel and cable and turbines, right? And so we are competing hard with each other to secure those contracts and to make sure that we can get the contracts in place to be able to build the stuff that we are promising Rob and his colleagues we are going to build, right? So yeah, so it's a real arms race, really, yeah. But more capacity is going to be needed.
Perfect. And then to the question about collaboration challenges, any couple of things you'd really like to have some academics working on? Leighton?
Yeah, I think where I see value in the academic partnership that we have here is partly in us being able to approach government. So I have government affairs within my team's remit, and being able to approach government and give them recommendations that are grounded in an academic background, not just hey, we'd like to sell more circuit breakers or something like this, but here's actually, Bemi and her team of students have dug into how we can decarbonize, the small and medium enterprise sector. I think to put a fine point on just an example there, we've identified that there's a skills gap, there's an availability gap of tradespeople. I mean, so many of the decisions around electrification are kitchen table decisions. Our boiler has gone out. What will we replace it with? A lot of people are not making that decision on a sustainability first or from a sustainability first framework. It's my house is cold. I need it to be warm again, and that comes down to what the technician has, the plumber in their van, in some cases, and that comes down to skills and comfort. That the army of tradespeople that we have out installing infrastructure right around the country every day, are they comfortable with heat pumps, for instance, or PV installations or these things? So I think there is a role for government to play, even without putting their thumb on the scales, directly with pricing, to enable and unlock the ecosystem so that we can electrify a lot more and a lot more quickly than we are doing today.
Okay, perfect. And Carolyn, do you have any thoughts of your top one or two questions you'd like academics to be working on?
Yeah, I guess from our perspective, because we're quite specific to our space, we have done research projects with what we think is going to be the thing after the next one. So that's usually quite precise. So we already have information flowing between different parts of our circuit boards, but we know that might be more complicated when we get to larger and larger systems. But that's not something we'll need for another 3 or 5 years, right? Because academic partnerships and research takes quite a bit longer than trying to do it internally. Can I say that? I have experienced this. Yeah. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not. But then the other thing is that the test facilities and access to approach on how to analyze the benefits, these are things that we may not have in-house. So we may not have 40 different channels to test different types of battery cells. These are really great partnerships that we've worked on before because we just don't have the infrastructure to do it in-house, and we would only do it maybe a couple times.
Yeah, great. Okay, great examples. And then going on to that tricky question about how are we going to actually bring down prices when we've got these challenging clean power targets for 2030. The government isn't kind of replete with cash and has lots of other spending priorities at the same time. And those companies that may provide the cash are looking for return on investment. So it's a great question. Probably one you want to ask Rob over a glass of wine. Sorry, that's the last time Rob speaks to me. But in the meantime, any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So, I think the happy position is that it's not really a case of government money coming in. There are examples. Well, you'll see this week that the National Wealth Fund closed a loan to us, Scottish Power, to Iberdrola, of £600 million, which is going directly into green energy projects here. But crucially, that's not a gift, it's a loan, and we're going to be paying it back with interest. It's on a term sheet in that way. But broadly speaking, the energy transition is going to be financed by companies like ours and like the others here. Iberdrola, our parent company, has set out investment plans for the UK of £24 billion through to 2032, which is going in transmission grids, it's going into distribution grids, it's going into renewable generation, right? And that's why do we, again, we're a business. We don't do that out of the goodness of our hearts. We do it for a rate of return, and we do it because the UK is a really good place to invest. Iberdrola is a global business. We operate in Spain, where we're from, but we operate in France, in Brazil, in Mexico, in the US. But the UK, so within Iberdrola, Scottish Power's kind of, is in a competition for capital. We're fighting against our US colleagues or our Australian colleagues, our Spanish colleagues, to get that quantum of capital coming here to the UK. And the UK does really well in that because they've got really good, stable mechanisms, say for renewable energy, electricity. The CFD regime has delivered brilliantly for the UK, right? And we want to see it continue to deliver brilliantly. And that sort of stable regime is so important to business. You hear it all the time. Businesses just, what do we want? We want certainty. And it's really, really true. If you trust a regime, trust an economy that we can invest this money, we'll get told what the rules are, and those rules will be maintained throughout the time, the length of the investment. That carries an awful lot of water, and that's why the UK is a really good place for companies like ours to invest in what we're investing in.
Leighton wanted to have a word, and then we'll come to you, Jim.
Yeah, even if we don't have a step change technologically that unlocks lower energy prices, I mean, there's a narrative that the UK has high average energy prices. That is correct, but that masks wide variability on the spot market through the day and mostly the night. And so I think there's a lot we can do for ratepayers, homeowners, voters, to lower the cost that they pay, not per unit, but I'm sorry, not like the rates that are charged, but when they use that electricity. So there's a well-known electricity retailer that's quite good at this, with the Octopus Fan Club, giving ratepayers a break who are in postcodes within a view shed of a windmill. That's quite powerful because there is a problem, I think, with resistance to building some of the renewable energy infrastructure that we need in the country, and getting people on board to see the benefit, to feel that benefit in their pocketbook is really important. And that doesn't necessarily require a load of new technology. I mean, it does require a smart meter in many cases, but it requires some business model innovation around the tariff regime, and then helping bring that, market that, educate customers around that.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to this, because obviously, kind of a bit like Tom said, and also what Leighton said, we all have also really big capital investment programs. We're also looking at investing over like 20 billion. So a lot of it will be in the network system. A lot of it will be sort of like across Scotland. But I think kind of tying it back down to sort of like where we kind of started this conversation is actually coming back down to innovation, because we're also building the infrastructure for the next 40 to 60 years. And so a huge chunk of it, while it's like big capital, large infrastructure programs, we are all working together to kind of like make it more innovative so that we have better business models. We can build it cheaper, we can build it better, faster. So all of these things, I think that's kind of where innovation can really play like a key role to make sure that in building this infrastructure, we do reduce the prices, and that sort of like remains the goal. So I think it circles back around to what innovation can do to help us build.
Brilliant. Well, that's a fantastic way to finish the panel. So thank you for bringing it back to the way we started. If you could join me in thanking the panelists for this interesting stuff. Okay, so I've done a terrible job of chairing to time, because we're past time, even according to the clock at the back of the room, which is 10 minutes slow. So that's not very impressive. I'm just going to finish off with 2 more minutes. So thank you again to the sponsors and our various speakers today. I'm going to just spend 2 minutes talking about a new initiative that we have at Imperial. I realized that I just sort of launched into the evening without introducing myself. I was by far the least important person that you've seen. But one of the things that I do at Imperial, I do 2 main things. One is that I'm director of Undaunted, which is our climate change and green innovation set of program of activities, and we support people like Carolyn and student and other innovators who have green solutions, make it out of the building and then into collaborating with some other people, and hopefully as successful as you've been. But what I'm also doing is I'm one of the co-directors, along with Mirabelle, who's over there at the back, and 2 other people, of our new School of Convergent Science in Sustainability. I've got lots of slides here. I'm not going to tell you all of them. But the idea of convergent science is for us at Imperial to be stepping up our level of ambition in terms of what we're doing on research that can deliver real world impact. And we're really interested in working with a whole range of disciplines, including the many disciplines that we have at Imperial, but also others outside. So speaking to what Gianna was saying about the need for social, technical, business model innovation, making sure that we can do all of those things to create a more sustainable world. And since we've got you all here as a captive, but don't worry, audience, we wanted to make sure that you had an opportunity to share with us your thoughts about how our new School of Convergent Science can produce interesting and new, engaging, interdisciplinary, and impactful research on some of the topics, including energy. So when you go outside for your coffee, I'll skip this. This is what Convergent Science is. This is what we're trying to do. When you're out there at coffee, you will see a printout of this. One of the things we're trying to do at this very early stage of these schools is come up with challenges that we think speak to that kind of level of ambition. And we are really only at the beginning of drafting what those challenges could look like. And one of the ones that's emerging is to do with energy. This is our first kind of go at it. You'll see some pieces of paper out there by the drinks and stuff that will have this. Comment on it. Cross things out, add words, tell us why it's wrong or what else you wish we were doing. There are also some questions that are broader. If you could tell us what you think we should be doing in the School of Convergent Science across sustainability as a whole, tell us. Answer some of those questions. And if you want to speak to us more about what we're trying to do, Mirabelle and I, or the other two co-directors, would love to have a more detailed conversation with you. Obviously, we'll reach out to some of the people that we already work with. But this is going to be quite a long journey in trying to get this right, but we hope to do some really impactful and bold things. So I'm going to stop there on that. There's some more ideas, but you've only got access to one outside in the hallway. But if you want to chat to me later, then we can share more of these ideas with you. So with that, I'm going to thank once again our speakers and our sponsors, Imperial Business Partners for making it happen, particularly Chris and Dara, I don't know where he is, and others, other areas at the back, for organizing everything so seamlessly. And are people going down the stairs to drinks or just, all right, so you won't miss it. Just go out the door and there are some refreshments. And thank you all for joining us.